If you leave STP totally alone, a single switch is going to be the root bridge for every single VLAN in our network. And we know that, we've seen that in action. But on a smaller network, that really might not be so bad. I'm sure you remember earlier when I mentioned I've had students say, well, we don't use VLANs, and they're actually using them. They just don't know they're using them. Well, they don't know that a single switch is the root bridge for all their VLANs. And again, in a smaller network, that might not matter. But a lot of networks aren't that small. So the thing is, we don't necessarily want to leave that default root switch selection up to chance, because we know the switch with the lowest MAC address is going to be crowned as the root, assuming all the priorities are left at their defaults. And that's not always going to work for us. Now, we can choose a particular switch to be the root bridge for all VLANs, or we can actually spread the workload around a bit and let one switch be the root for some VLANs and another switch is the root for the rest of the VLANs. It's really up to you, and there's no absolute one right answer. Anytime you get into design like this, there's no one right answer. But you're always smart to make sure that, say, an end-of-life switch, a lower powered switch, is not going to be the workhorse for your entire network. You want to get your most powerful switches generally as your root switches. And again, you can spread it around as much as you like. You can make one powerful switch the root for all your VLANs, or you can spread that around a bit. Now, before this lab, I did a write erase delete VLAN.dat and created 3 other VLANs, 10, 20, and 30 for our next lab. One thing I do want to point out, make sure you note that the cabling has changed, and we're going to be adding a switch and 2 cables as this lab progresses. Now, the first part of the lab here looks pretty familiar. Switch 1 and switch 2 connected at their fast 010 interfaces, and there's only one trunk this time between switches 1 and 2. Now right now, switch 1 is still going to end up being the root for every single VLAN, but what we'd like to have happen is make switch 2 the root for VLANs 20 and 30, while leaving switch 1 the root for VLANs 1 and 10. And there are 2 methods to make this happen. I find the much more efficient method is using the spanning tree VLAN root primary command. Don't worry, I'm going to sneak the second one in on you too. But let's go on out to switch 2. Well, that was not a good lineup. That's much better. Let's go over here and do a show spanning VLAN 20. And we can see, as we expect, we know we're not on the root. We know 4 different ways to tell that. And there's the one interface that we expect to see, 0/10, is our root port. So what we're going to do is make this switch the root for VLANs 20 and 30. We'll do them one at a time. Spanning VLAN. I could do this as one command, 20, 30, but let's just do 20 first. And this time we're going to use the root option. And note that I have to keep going with this. I can't just say spanning VLAN 20 root enter, because I don't have a CR there at the end of this option list. So I have primary and I have secondary. So I'm going to make this my primary root. Diameter I mentioned briefly earlier. That's a way to have the STP timers dynamically adjusted depending upon the diameter of your network. We're not going to use that option. We'll just go with spanning VLAN 20 root primary. And we see that we're already the root. Can't beat that. We can see this bridge is the root. We also see that the root ID address has changed. And look at that priority change. What I really like about this command, instead of using the other method I'm going to show you, is that the switch will go out basically and say, okay, how low do I need to set my priority in order to be the root? It's not just going to go one under that, but it is going to look at the root switches, the current root switches priority, and say, okay, what do I need to do to beat that? And so just that quickly, you've made switch 2 the root for VLAN 20. Let's go ahead and just do a quick show spanning VLAN 30. And we see what we expect to see. We're not yet the root, but we will be. And I'll just do a 30 root primary. And we'll do an up arrow to repeat my commands. And so far so good. So again, VLAN 20 and 30, now the root is switch 2. We've spread that around a little bit. And let's go down the screen here. This is where we are now. We've got switch 1 is the root for VLANs 1 and 10, and switch 2 the root for VLANs 20 and 30. Now I know you want to use that secondary option that we saw, right? So that's what we're going to do next. And we're actually going to bring in another switch. And I already have this switch cabled and connected. I just need to open the ports here on switches 1 and 2 to bring that in. So that's O12. I believe it's O11 here. No shut. Oops, and it's hard not to go to router 1 when you're doing that. T interface fast O12. No shut. And I will double check that here, but you can see on switch 2 fast O11 goes to switch 3. I will move that SW3 there in the black. I see it's a little hard to see, but I will move that for the book. And here we've got switch 1 fast O/12 leading to switch 3. So here's a little pop quiz for you, and I'll bring it up on the live equipment. If switch 2 goes down, which one of those devices is going to take over as the root for VLANs 20 and 30? We do a show spanning VLAN 20 here, and you can see those. That's still opening, but it's in learning state, so it'll be open in a moment. So then we could go down to router 3. And we see the info there. So we know the priorities are at the default between switches 1 and 3. There's our line protocol for interface VLAN 1 coming up, so we're all set. So with these two MAC addresses, switch 1's being 0017 9466 F780 and switch 3's being 001C 0FBF 2F00, who becomes the root if switch 2 disappears? That one's pretty quick. That one's pretty quick to figure out because they both have the default priority, so it comes down to the MAC address, and switch 1's MAC address is definitely lower than that of switch 3's. Switch 1's address begins with 000, switch 3's begins with 001, so nothing after that really matters. So what I'm going to do then is go ahead and just reload switch 2. And when that one goes away, what's going to happen between switches 1 and 3? Let's check it out on show spanning VLAN 20. And you can see that in switch 2's absence, switch 1 has already become the root. It's just that fast. And we'll go ahead and check switch 3. But we know that if this is also the root for VLAN 20, something's gone terribly wrong. And you can see that it now recognizes, switch 3 does, recognizes switch 1 as the root. So right now, with switch 2 gone for whatever reason, switch 1 is now the root for VLANs 20 and 30. So once switch 2 comes back online, it's going to take that role back over. So what if I wanted, though, for switch 3 to take over as the root for VLAN 20 when switch 2 is unavailable? You know, can I do that? Sure I can. We know we can do it with a secondary command, but we want to prove it. So what I'm going to do right now is pause the video while switch 2 continues to boot, and once it does, I'll pick it right back up and we'll pick it up right here. All right, after many tests, as you can see, I'll just show you this just real quick. This is what happened when I restarted switch 2. And I could have just shut the ports down that were leading to 1 and 3, but I wanted to do it this way. And let's see, then you get your restricted rights legend. It's going to tell you how to reach tech support, and then all the tests begin, of course. And we see all those. There's your warning about cryptographic features. Don't mess around. Then it's going to start giving you some information about your switch and the ports and the image, and then all kinds of other stuff while things get loaded. And here, I'll go ahead and run it again. But when the switch came back up, it's switch 2, it's already taken back over as the root. So that is not a permanent deal. We know that the root bridge elections are really always going on. A decision is made, but every 2 seconds those config BDUs are getting sent and then flooded throughout the network. So the root bridge has to keep proving that it's the root bridge. So now at this point, what we'd like to do is have switch 3. Let's see, that's what I want right there. When switch 2 is gone again, I want switch 1 to once again become the root for VLAN 10, but then I want switch 3 to be the root for VLAN 20. So what I need to do there is use my secondary command. And I'm going to go down to switch 3 to do that. 20. We're going to use root again. And this time we're going to use secondary, and the diameter option, we're just going to leave that alone. So let's take a look at the effect, and you can see that it has really adjusted the priority all the way down to 28,692. Note that that's not good enough to become the root, and we didn't want it to be since we want this to be the secondary. So our root ID priority is still 24,596. We know that's switch 2. And the bridge ID, the priority of the local device, is 28,692. So what we will do then, we're going to reload that switch again. I think it's fun because you just don't do a whole lot of this at work. At least I hope not. So now that that switch is gone, we're going to get some information about some interfaces going down. You can see this is switch 1, and for VLAN 10, this bridge is indeed the root. That's what we wanted. But what we didn't want is for it to become the root of VLAN 20 again. Let's see what happens with that forward. Okay, so I've got this bridge as the root here, 28,692. Let's go back to 5. And now it's gone. It took a few seconds there. It was still registering that as the root, but you can see now with VLAN 20, the way we wanted it, that the root information is about switch 3. The bridge information is about switch 1. Took a few seconds there. We get so used to it being instantaneous that we get a little spoiled. So let's again go back to switch 3. We'll run show spanning VLAN 10, and you can see, of course, this device is not the root for VLAN 10. We didn't want it to be. And we run show spanning VLAN 20, and this bridge is the root. Secondary command is a great way to make sure that your next best choice for the root actually becomes the root if your primary root disappears, because that's something else we have to keep in mind. You know, that does happen, and you don't want it again left to chance if your primary root goes down. Oh, well, the secondary root will now be the device with the lowest MAC address. We really don't want that to happen. And as I note here on the screen, if you really want switch 1 to become the desired secondary root for VLAN 10, well, you'd be fine right now. But if there is another switch added to the network later, and there almost always is, that new switch might have a lower MAC than that of switch 1. So I would go ahead and hard code switch 1 as the secondary root for VLAN 10 in this particular situation. So that's how you configure a switch as the primary root for any given VLAN. Now you know how to set up the secondary roots as well. And in the next video, I'm going to take just a few minutes to show you the other method. It's more of a manual method, changing the priority manually, and we'll check that on the next vid.